know that Delegate Toscano might have to step out, so we're going to try to get as many bills heard as we can. If we can get any heard, we also have Delegate King, who's on his way back now. So we're going to start so we get some business done. We're not trying to play any partisan games with some of the Democrats out of the room. The bill is really close, and we need everybody in the room. We'll go at ease or take that bill by and come back to it. We just want to keep the committee's work moving. There are some duplicate bills in here. The plan will be that if the first bill we hear advances, we will then lay the duplicate bill or the alternate version of that approach on the table. We won't do that until we see what happens with those bills. We're going to hear the first two bills. We have two patrons who are here. We're going to hear Delegate Bell and Delegate Head first. So Delegate Bell, come on up. I think this is a version of a bill a lot of us have seen before. I think what was on, you have a substitute, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let's get the substitute distributed to everybody. This is the correctional officer's presumption. My understanding is that you've limited just to the infectious diseases portion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It is only the infectious disease portion.
And of course, anybody who's looked at this sees the massive fiscal impact statement on the original bill. Do we know yet what the fiscal impact statement is on the reduced version?
I'm going to give you my best estimate. First off, the numbers on the fiscal impact statement were higher. There were 7,500 correctional officers, really 6,500. There is a fiscal impact. They were estimating it somewhere, was it 3.1, almost 3.2 million. You take out the heart and lung and you stick with the difference between the cost of the baseline fiscal and the cost of the additional, it'd be about 1.8 million is what I'm estimating.
Okay, is that an annual cost or is that a one-time cost?
It would be an annual cost. But Mr. Chairman, if I may proceed, what I want to make is there is a cost to doing this, absolutely. But the point I want to make, which I think is something that's lost, is we're already experiencing huge annual costs. We have actually, JLR study just came out in January 2017, which highlighted the atrocious turnover rate we have with our correctional officers. It's one of the highest in the Commonwealth. We actually have, according to that study, 70% voluntary turnover rate. Some of our facilities have as high as 49% in the facility. And there's a number of them in the 40s. There's a 16.3% vacancy right now. What that translates to is a tremendous cost of training all these new correctional officers and recruiting them. The cost of recruiting a new correctional officer is over $216 per officer. The training for a 5-week course is over $17,000. So what we've been averaging is over 1,100 new officers a year we've had to recruit and train. The third quarter of FY17, we actually trained 546, and at the same quarter we lost 510. So we spent $10 million recruiting and training in one quarter, and frankly I think we need to do a number of things to stop this attrition rate. There are 14 peace officers in Virginia. This is the only peace officer we have that does not have the presumption of disability. And this will only add the limited presumption, which would be communicable infectious diseases, which frankly they're exposed to every day. There's prisoners that have HIV positive, that are hepatitis C, MRSA, and with HIPAA protection, they don't know who has what. And in the line of duty, they're experiencing dangerous situations. And frankly, my argument is, Mr. Chairman, we're spending a great deal of money already replacing it. So instead of spending a lot of money on doing something that I believe is wrong, not taking care of those in uniform who we all stood up and clapped for today, we could spend less money to treat them right and to turn around this terrible attrition rate we have. I will note from the JLR study, a couple of things that they mentioned is it's not just going to be about money. It's going to be about treating them better and doing things other than money. I think that the disability presumption is one of them, knowing that we have their backs covered if they get hurt in the line of duty. Last thing I'll say, which frankly I think is a shame, but I want to say it anyway. While this is giving them the presumption it's not raising your salary, I have a separate bill which would do an exit survey to really get better data on why they're leaving. I think that's important for us as well. Currently, we have 1,164 officers, depending on their family size, that would qualify for SNAP. And these are very low-paid people in dangerous jobs. I think it's a shame that our uniformed professionals would be on food stamps. But the least we can do is provide for them if they're hurt while they're protecting us in the Commonwealth. Mr. Chairman, the new points are really the fact that this is a limited presumption, not the full presumption, and the fact that we have this JLR study highlighting this very bad turnover rate. But I argue there is a high turnover, and we're spending a lot of money. So the fiscal impact of this, the 1.8 million I'm estimating, if we lose 1,100 officers a year now, which we've been losing more than that, 1,400 last year, if we only can reduce it by 10%, just lose 90, that pays for the 1.8 million. So it's a small amount of money to turn this tide around. Thank you.
So just procedurally, let's get the substitute before us, and I have a couple of comments or questions for you, and I'm sure others will. Do we have a motion to adopt substitute HB 107? All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt substitute HB 107. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed. All right, substitute before us. You said something there near the end that was important to me because I'm all about data and I'm all about evidence-based policy. Making you know this. I hate the way we do fiscal impact statements, and I hate the way they only evaluate only one side of the equation, not the other side of the equation. And we're sort of at the whims of whoever creates that fiscal impact statement that we're then bound to it. So what I was going to ask you was, how can we get to the point where we can quantify the actual back-end savings side of this if we were to pass something like this bill? So obviously we can't just say 0% of the people currently leave would leave. We can't just make up a number. I didn't realize you had another bill that might actually help us get that data. If we're able to do an exit survey to see why people are leaving. It's the same conversation we need to be having with teachers who are leaving the profession to figure out why we're spending all this money to replace teachers who are being driven out of the profession. So I'm glad you have that. Now it makes it difficult, as you know, procedurally for us until we have that data to act on a bill that almost certainly won't have the funding this year based on what we're hearing from appropriations. I'm glad you're advancing that. Okay. Do you have anyone here?
If I can say,
yes, sir.
Under the budget amendment, on the fiscal amendment, they did say it was indeterminate and the cost would be absorbed by the agency. And my argument would be they're spending so much right now recruiting and training, they can absorb this and it'd be a savings. How much would it decrease the attrition by? Without knowing that survey, we don't really know. So I think it's going to take more than this, but I think this is a critical first step in doing that. And I agree, it would be better to have the data from that survey. But the reason why I want to act now is because we have a crisis. We have a crisis with the number leaving, and that's why I feel the urgency to act now. Thank you.
Okay. So let's have anybody you have here today to speak on behalf of the bill. I know you've got some good supporters on behalf of the correctional officers who've been here before. Thank you for being here. Introduce yourself and offer your testimony, sir. Thanks.
My name is Donald Bell. I am with the National Coalition for Public Safety Officer, representing correctional officers, parole, probation across Virginia. I'm also a retired correctional officer. I want to highlight what the delegate spoke about by example. A couple of weeks ago, there was an officer in one of the prisons who was scalded by a liquid substance. This liquid substance was heated in a microwave and thrown on this officer. They also received second-degree burns on her arm and hand. We still don't know what was in that liquid. The officer had requested that the offender be tested to see if this offender may have one of those infectious diseases. Also, a couple of weeks ago, we had another officer who was assaulted while escorting a nurse. This officer received a fractured chin, broken nose, and a laceration on the face. We don't know if any blood from the offender came into contact with that officer. These are situations that are happening in these facilities on a daily basis. Human feces, urine being thrown in people's faces. This is a occurrence throughout these prison systems. And we never know when one of these people might be infected with one of these septics. Now, our point is this. There is a cause. We understand that. But at some point, there's a time to do the right thing. And we can't understand why other public safety groups can have protections where it concerns presumption, yet the only presumption that the correctional officers are acting for is something that they face on a daily basis. They don't know when they may come into contact with these diseases in the course of performing their duty. And we're just simply asking to do the right thing.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else here speak in favor of the bill? Ms. Donna, can I put you on the spot and ask you a question? I would ask the commissioners, but I'm afraid it would be an inappropriate question to ask them in interpretation. I know you served on the commission, so if you don't know the answer, I apologize for putting you on the spot. Here's my question. The presumptions as it applies to heart disease and those types of things are very abnormal in the comp world because those aren't the type of diseases that are normally treated through the comp system. Normally we have traumatic injuries, not something like heart disease. Is exposure to an infectious substance while working as a correctional officer the type of thing that if you could prove exposure for and that you got the infectious disease, something that would be compensable in the course and scope of employment, or is that not the type of thing that would be compensable?
Mr. Chairman, I think what you're asking is whether it's treated as an
HIV, that might be harder. There may be some other things that you could link exposure to, and it would be an accident to be compensable.
The purpose of the presumption is simply to flip the
Right.
burden of proof.
That's right. So, and I guess my point there is that the way the law is now, it isn't that it's impossible to recover for these claims. It's that without the presumption, some of the claims may be very difficult to recover for.
That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that. Thanks for being here. Anybody else here to speak in favor of the bill? Does anybody have any questions for the patron or the supporter before we hear any opposition? All right, anybody here to speak in opposition to the bill? And you'll get the last word, John. Tell you about it.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, or afternoon, I should say. I'm John Hurd on behalf of the Self-Insurers Association, who has both public and private members, and also Metis Holdings, Inc., which is the company that oversees the administration of all workers' comp and liability claims against VACO's risk pool members. We opposed this measure for the same reasons we opposed it 2 years ago. You all have seen the fiscal impact statement on it. It's pretty high. What I would point out to you is that on top of workers' comp benefits, you also have to consider the fact that they're going to get line and duty act benefits as well. So there's a double pot in terms of the fiscal impact of these type of bills. The important thing is the Department of Corrections does not perform pre-employment physicals on their new potential hires now. And I'm not pointing out anything different that is in that fiscal impact statement when you read it carefully. The department hires on average 1,409 correctional officers per year. They estimate that the cost of testing all those current employees is a little bit over $3 million. The average number of new hires, as I said, is 1,409, so the ongoing testing cost would be about just short of $500,000 annually. I would point out to you, and it goes along with the point the chairman was making a second ago. You don't necessarily need a presumption to prove these claims. You can prove them without the presumption, just like any normal person would have to prove their workers' compensation case. Finally, as I said, remember that each of these corrections officers, if they get an award, workers' comp award, they're also going to get a line of duty act award too. I would ask you all to consider one thing. If this bill somehow advances, I would tell you that you need an amendment on it to make very clear, as the fiscal impact statement says, that you don't have a retroactive application in here. That'd be my points. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with that one is because some of these are occupational diseases that may manifest over time, at what point do you cut that moment off? I did have a question for you while you were here. Did anybody else in the subcommittee have any questions for Mr. Hurd? My question to you was, we've heard this idea that if we were to pass this and maybe other measures would improve retention, which I think I agree with conceptually, and that would save us money somewhere in the Department of Corrections budget. I don't think it's the same stack of money, though, that would both pay this claims that we would save in the recruiting and training and retention of new people. So if we were to say, so the money that would be, the fiscal impact statement indicates this would cost, where does that money come from?
That money, I believe, comes from the general fund. We have Department of Corrections, I believe, in the room. They can probably answer the question better.
Short of the fiscal impact comes from the Department of Corrections.
And so that would be an offset within the same budget, arguably. Okay, great, thank you. Anybody else here to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Chris Legault, BML Insurance Programs. I'm going to be very brief. We too oppose this as we have in the past. We think it's a dangerous precedent, especially when there's no pre-employment examination of the Department of Corrections personnel. They don't screen for infectious diseases now. And what you can do, if you should pass this, you'd be making pre-existing conditions subject to the presumption. And that's a real serious problem in the workers' comp arena.
Delegate Key.
Mr. Chair, just wanted to follow up on the point that Mr. Legault just made. You say that correctional officers do not get pre-screened before they're employed.
No.
Is that a policy reason? Is it a statutory reason, or why?
I suspect it has a lot to do with the cost of that per exam cost, and the fact that they would need under this bill as well to examine and do physical exams
some costs up front, but in the long run, we'd be saving a lot more money as well.
Well, you'd be costing money every year. I think that just going back to David said, it's close to half $500,000 per year on an ongoing basis, in addition to the upfront cost of getting everybody done. I don't know that you would save money on that at all. Thank you.
Any other questions for for Mr. Legato? All right, Delegate Bell.
A couple things I want to say in response to the comments just made. Fiscal impact is providing for that baseline fiscal, because that is one of the issues. Right now they get a fiscal which is limited. It's a $60.50 fiscal, and where we got the cost of what the fiscal would be was we took the Virginia State Police fiscal, which is $540. There's $190 of cost for psychological evaluation they wouldn't need, which gets you down minus the 60 to around $300. So if you did $1,400 per year, that would get you to $476,000. The question would have to be made, and this is a good question. Do you grandfather the communicable disease to all the existing uniform officers because perhaps they could have contracted something already when they were in uniform and in service? Or do you go ahead and test them all then and give them a baseline assessment then? Certainly be a greater implementation cost if you did it then. But I would argue in the end, $500,000 a year in this implementation cost, we're spending $20 million a year. We are the pipeline for the federal prisons. Because then once we train our correctional officers and that they're highest performing, they go to a federal prison, they get a pay raise, they get the presumption of disability. They go to a sheriff's office and work there as a deputy in a less dangerous environment, no offense to them, and they get the presumption. I also want to point out, again, we're talking about setting a precedence. I'm not sure what we're setting a precedence for. There's 14 types of peace officers in Virginia. This is the only one that doesn't have this. Fish and Wildlife, ABC. No offense to them, volunteer firefighters. These are uniformed Virginia professionals that we spend 5 weeks training and entrust to guard and protect us against our most dangerous citizens. Last year we had a number of people, correctional officers, 2 in Georgia and 1 in North Carolina, were killed in the line of duty. This is a dangerous job. So I believe it's a matter of fairness, and I also believe, frankly, it's the right decision morally and fiscally, and ask for your support.
All right, any other questions for Delegate Bell? All right, so for the subcommittee, the questions we have before us, if we want to advance this bill or some version of this bill, does it need an amendment? That's the policy question of what universe of people we want to cover. And then I think it would have to go to appropriations regardless. Do you have a budget amendment in for the full amount of your original bill or for the smaller amount, or what do you have pending?
I decided not to do a budget amendment because I believe it's going to be absorbed in the agency's budget based on the fact they can take it. Plus there is a general, there's a budget amendment already in for increased salary for state employees. It could be also covered by that if it were taken there.
So I totally agree with you that we ought to be able to do stuff like that. Of course, we're not allowed to do stuff like that where we tell them, yeah, it won't actually occur because you're going to save money in the back end. Now, technically, with the fiscal impact statement here, you usually get a yes or a no, and this has the indeterminate line because they can't tell you how much it's going to be because they're guessing based on numbers. And I would maybe defer to the chairman. I would think that if we were going to report this, it would need to go to appropriations. I think you got a letter on it. Yeah. But let's see if the inclinations go forward. I mean, there's no question these people are exposed to incredible risk of violence and harm and sickness every single day. The question is, what's the best way to take care of those folks within our limited state resources we currently have? I can tell you my very first year here, 7 years ago, I was on militia, 1 year there, and this bill was for militia that year. So I think it's gone through just about every committee here, and a lot of people taking different shots at that. I love the idea that you put in a study and try to figure out if we can quantify the loss associated with different factors why people are leaving. So
That's true.
Delegate King.
Well, to the extent that the policy decision for this committee, not the funding part, but the policy decision is if we want to look back and put some kind of a hard cap on the retroactivity, is there a particular time frame that the patron would think makes sense that you would recommend, or do you want us to, at this stage, move forward whichever way without that conversation?
I mean, frankly, given the fact that we're turning over such a high percentage each year, most of the correctional officers we have haven't been on the force for that long. So I think it's a judgment call either way you go. I think it's more important that we show that we're going to do the right thing by them. So this is something I would be totally amenable to negotiating whichever way would be best or have the least fiscal impact. I should point out, I have no correctional facilities in my district. I'm fighting for this because I think it's a clear injustice and it's the right thing to do.
Has your bill still hasn't been heard of militia yet on the exit survey, right?
It is not.
Okay. All right, anybody else from the subcommittee have any questions for the patron? All right, bills before the subcommittee.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to report and refer to appropriations as fine bill.
Alright, so we have a motion to recommend reporting and referring to appropriations, which we have confirmed. We do have a letter here. That motion has been seconded. That is a debatable motion. Anybody have any, from any of the subcommittee? Alright, we'll open up the electronic voting board, cast vote on the board. All right, we'll close the roll. So the recommendation of the full committee will be a report and refer to the subcommittee for appropriations. Thank you, Delegate Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we hear Delegate Head's bill next. That is House Bill 139.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, House Bill 139 addresses the credentialing for physicians that are in position for reimbursement for certain health plans. Currently, the rules that we've got in place give the health plans 180 days and leave a lot of the physicians and consequently the practices and places that they work in a significant amount of limbo. To give you a little bit of background on this, insurance companies typically will drag this process out for as long as possible, often taking up to the full 6 months that they are allowed to credential a doctor. Currently, if you're not in network and a care provider that you see is in credentialing, then the provider either has to deny coverage or you have to pay an out-of-pocket rate, which is why insurance companies like it a lot better the way that it currently is. They'll use this often as a bargaining chip in the negotiation process. And even the interesting thing, even a new doctor with one particular location who has been previously credentialed at another location has to go through the credentialing process all over again. Also, just the really dumbfounding thing to me, whereas government is very rarely the most efficient option. Again, credentialing for physicians in the private sector is taking 6 months. If it's a Medicare or Medicaid credentialing process, they're able to go through the same process in 4 to 6 weeks. So clearly there is an improper delay here. But regardless of that, however long the process takes, what this bill seeks to do is just to say, while they have completed their application, and once they've completed that application, then the reimbursements are going to be made as if they were in-network physicians. And then if for some reason they are found not to be, then they owe the money back. Everything has to be settled back up. But it goes ahead and streamlines the process and levels the playing field for both physicians and for the providers, as well as, most importantly, for the patients that are receiving care. I think we also do have the support of several folks that I was pleased to get here. We have, I think, the Virginia Hospital Association, and also, let's see, Hospital Healthcare Association, also the Virginia Academy of Family Physicians is in support. I think we've got some good folks here that may want to speak to this as well.
All right, great, thanks. Any questions for the patron before we hear from supporters? All right, anybody here speak in favor of the bill? Come on up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Hunter J. Emerson, Virginia Academy of Family Physicians. Delegate Head has eloquently explained the bill, but just wanted to reinforce this is a real world problem where physicians can work for up to 180 days effectively without reimbursement. Medicare has changed its payment rules to address exactly this situation. Medicare now reimburses retroactively to the date of the physician's credentialing application. But in the commercial space, many of the health plans only reimburse to the date that application was approved. So any services by the physician in the pendency of the application being considered are not reimbursed and are left for the physician to bill the patient directly, which as a consumer is very difficult because you're paying healthcare insurance premiums all through that period. You expect that your
Mr. Johnson comes up, for members of the subcommittee, I'm told the request to speak button does work. I don't care if you use it or not, because I think I can see everybody. But if I'm not responding to you, just hit that button and I'll see it. Go ahead, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Scott Johnson, General Counsel, Medical Society of Virginia. We fully support the bill and associate myself with Mr. Jameson's remarks. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brett Rollins, Virginia Hospital Healthcare Association, and again with my healthcare colleagues, support this bill as employers of large numbers of physicians and other healthcare providers. We have quite an amount of credentialing processes to work through, and this is very helpful in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here speaking in favor of the bill? Anybody here speaking in opposition to the bill? Introduce yourself and offer your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, Doug Gray, Executive Director of the Virginia Association of Health Plans. We're opposed to this bill because it would require us to pay someone who has not been credentialed. We don't expose our networks and our patients to people who haven't been verified. Our NCQA requirements, our accreditation require us to have an accreditation process in place to make sure that our patients are not exposed to people who have not been credentialed. I've handed out a article or a press release from the U.S. State Attorney's Office, Eastern District of Virginia, dated December 20th. Man arrested on fraud charges for posing as a doctor, and talks about a Glen Allen man who was arrested and he applied to medical staffing companies. That's who we're talking about. He was approved by the staffing companies, went to work and fraudulently tried to provide services without a license. He falsified what he was doing. We can't favor a policy that would allow our members to be exposed to this kind of person. So what we're trying to do is verify. If people who are applying for credentialing start their application on time, it should get done in much less than 180 days. 180 days is just what's in the statute. It doesn't take us that long. It takes us more like 30 days. What's going on in this case is we sometimes have applicants who have got their training in another country, and it is hard to verify their training when it's overseas. When it's here, it takes a lot less time and can be done more quickly. And in response to the patron's remarks, we do have policies in place to allow somebody who's been previously credentialed to be re-credentialed quickly, as long as they haven't been gone from credentialing for too long. So those are our comments on the bill. We just can't favor a policy that would expose our members to people who may not be credentialed. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Gray? All right, anybody else here speaking in opposition to the bill? All right, patron gets the last word.
Some of the comments were quite eloquent. The information that I've received from a number of folks who've been going through this process is that it really is very, very arduous. And as you've heard from people who have spoken in favor of this bill, one final thing that you might find interesting is that a version of this bill passed unanimously in Tennessee in both houses and is now the law because it's a problem there as well. So we just hope that you will look favorably on the legislation.
I said it was the last word, and I actually have a question. I don't know if it's for Mr. Johnson or for somebody else. I want to ask about physician licensure in the state and how a situation like what Mr. Gray has shown us here can occur. I understand on their end of their credentialing for payment purposes. How does someone who shouldn't properly be practicing medicine in Virginia reach a point where they're able to do so?
Mr. Chairman, I would say the first thing you do, if you go to the website at the Department of Health Professions, each physician who has an active license in Virginia has got a profile up. So if somebody filed an application representing that they're Dr. Scott Johnson, you can go there and pull it up. Any of us can, the public can, and you can immediately try to compare the notes. Did they say they went to the same medical school online? Did they show the same license date online? And if you see irregularities, that ought to send up reverse flags. But, trying to legislate against criminals is always a challenging thing. Somebody can try to work it, but there are pretty easy safeguards to figure out if this person is legit.
Yeah, the scenario where somebody could somehow not properly be practicing medicine, but is practicing medicine, and now we're going to get them paid it seems like we need to be at the front, catching that person at the front end is where that's caught, not at the insurance credentialing side. I understand how that would be a next level of protection. So, okay. Great, thanks. All right, anything else from the subcommittee? All right, the bill's before us. HB 139. I think I heard a second down there. Any debate? Delegate Key.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and I'm gonna put a no only because I want to keep this on the regular calendars. Because I mean, obviously, I think I see merits on both sides, but I want to just spend a little more time thinking about this, and maybe we can talk to some other members before we move to the full committee. So that's the only reason I'm putting a no vote on.
Okay. All right, hearing no further debate, we will open the roll. The motion is to recommend reporting. Cast your vote electronic voting board. All right, close the roll. The subcommittee recommends reporting on a 6-1 vote. All right, we're going to hear Delegate Klein's bill next. Is this the exact same version or a different version of what we did last year?
Chairman, this is the exact same voting.
All right, so this is the bill on health insurance across state lines that I think came out of the House last year, if I recall correctly.
It did, Mr. Chairman.
HB
6632. As the subcommittee is aware, the 2018 Charlottesville area has the highest percentage increase in premiums in the whole nation, at 247%, more expensive than a plan for a 40-year-old lowest price bronze plan was in 2017. We introduced this bill last year and in anticipation of action from the federal government, following President Trump's inauguration, was talking about this. Even though the repeal and replace did not occur this year, he's gone ahead and attempted through regulations to allow for purchase of insurance across state lines. This would enable Virginia to get ahead of the game, and if and when the federal government does signal that it's allowed at the federal level, Virginia's already authorized to do this. It's just a matter of signaling to other states that there's an interest on Virginia's part and the ability of Virginia citizens to obtain lower cost health insurance with fewer mandates. As the subcommittee is well aware, Virginia has among the highest number of mandates in the country, and this would give citizens a way to get relief.
And to any members of the subcommittee too who consistency has any value, if you sit to my right, you voted yes for House Bill 2233 last year, and if you sit to my left, you voted no for House Bill 2233 last year. Okay, anybody here speak in favor of the bill? Anybody here speak in opposition to the bill?
Yes. It's consistent. Mr. Chairman, I'm Doug Gray from the Virginia Association of Health Plans. I would remind you that all of the things that you voted for thus far would not apply to out-of-state plans, and nor would any consumer protections. I would also remind you that it's very hard to get a competitive product together from out of state if you don't have the volume to negotiate a discount with a limited number of providers who have a limited number of competitors. And that, in fact, is where we are. So the prospects for such an approach working are good. That being said, I understand that you passed it last year, and so I've said my piece.
Thank you, sir. Come on up and introduce yourself off your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, Bruce King with the Virginia Architects Association. We don't have a position, you're not called when somebody has a statement that's not necessarily against, but I want you to know that I've been
It's
talking
ambivalence.
a little bit with Delegate Klein, and I've suggested, and he's agreed, we're gonna take a look at it further, and that is a provision that Delegate Marshall may remember back when you had small business, and that is a provision that essentially says the insurance plan can pick what covered services they have. That if a Virginia provider is licensed to render that service, which traditionally is more cost effective than other types of providers, then that provider group would be allowed to participate at the terms and conditions, the fees, credentials that the plan requires. That way it increases competition, but it also makes sure that when a plan offers services, there are providers to render the service. So we're going to work on just that one little discuss it further. With that, I want you to understand it's not an opposition, we're going to be talking.
Great, thank you, sir. Anybody else here to speak in opposition to the bill? All right, Paige, you get the last word.
If the train's moving, I'm not getting in the way.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to recommend reporting HB 1201. That's been seconded. Again, that's a motion to recommend reporting to the full committee. Any debate? Hearing none, the clerk will open the electronic voting board. Cast your vote on the board. All right, the vote is 5-2 to recommend reporting. Thank you, sir. All right, we're gonna do some real quick cleanup here on a few bills, and I'm gonna get each one of these pulled up in order so we can deal with them. Having recommended reporting that bill, the plan is to lay Delegate Weber's House Bill 49 on the table. I've discussed that with him. This is a narrower attempt to do the same thing, so Delegate Klein's broader bill takes procedural precedence. So if we can pull up HB 49, again, this is Delegate Weber's bill to allow the sale of foreign health insurance. So the motion will be motion on the table. That's been moved and seconded. All right, that's now a recorded vote. So all those which vote, cast vote, and electronic voting board. All right, the clerk will close the roll. The vote is 6-0 to recommend laying House Bill 49 on the table. All right, our next procedural matter is Delegate Yancey's House Bill 434. The plan is to lay that bill on the table and ask the chairman who's sitting in front of me to send a letter to HERC, which Delegate Yancey serves on, to take a look at this issue. Everybody can take a look at that bill. Again, these are not recorded votes. We lay these bills on the table, so take a look closely. This is related to proton therapy. We have a couple bills on this issue this year. So the motion, we're up now. So the motion will be a motion to lay House Bill 434 on the table. That's been moved and seconded. We'll request that Chairman Kilgore send a letter referring this bill to HERC, on which Delegate Yancey serves. All right, the roll is open. All those wishing to vote, cast vote on the electronic voting board. All right, the vote is closed. The vote is 7-0 to lay House Bill, to recommend laying House Bill 434 on the table. We also, you want 328 to go by for the day? 328. You want both of those to go by for the day? All right, so Delegate Yancey wants 328 and 435. These are the expedited review bills. They are actually trying to work on some language, so we are not going to expedite the review of these bills. We're going to do it as slowly as possible.
Correct, Mr. Chairman, just for everyone to know, we just recently received word from the Bureau of Insurance and the SEC for some suggested language, so in light of that, we'd like to ask both these bills to go by today so that we can look at the language and incorporate it and bring it back at the appropriate time.
All right, so we got some new language from the Bureau. That's procedurally the appropriate thing to do. I just want to make the subcommittee aware. We were going to meet our last meeting next week. We are now bumping that off a week because Subcommittee 3 is going to meet in that slot. So we have only one meeting slot left before crossover. We'll get everything done that we can get done, but that'll be on February the 6th. So all the remaining bills on this subcommittee's docket, which include a lot of employment-related bills and anything by for the day today, will be February 6th. Are we able to, from a technological standpoint, take those two bills in a block by for the day? I guess that's not a recorded vote anyways. All right, so we have a motion to take those 328 and 435 by for the day. Moving second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, do you still want your 111 heard today? Okay, so we're not going to jump to that right now, but we'll have that. We have Delegate Davis has asked that 969 be laid on the table as well. This is a workers' compensation bill. I have a motion to recommend, or motion to lay House Bill 969 on the table. As soon as we get it up on the board, we will vote on that. All right, the motion is to lay 969 on the table. That's voting electronic voting board. All right, the vote is 7-0 to lay that bill on the table. We have two more bills that are similar. They're Delegate Hugo's bill and Delegate Reed's bill. After we hear from Delegate Carter and Delegate Guzman, we'll hear from Delegate Hugo. If we advance his bill, then we would lay Delegate Reed's bill on the table. I'm going to wait to do that until we see what happens on Delegate Hugo's bill. Delegate Carter, welcome, Subcommittee number 2. Come on up. I think you have 3 bills, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And we'll take them in numerical order if that's okay with you. So the first bill will be House Bill 460, retaliatory discharge.
That's correct. So, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. House Bill 460 is a small change in the language to the retaliation protection for injured workers who have filed a workers' compensation claim or who intend to file a workers' compensation claim. Under current law, the only prohibited retaliatory action is that an employer cannot fire an employee solely for the
the purpose of retaliation. My proposed change will change that to if such discharge is motivated to any extent by knowledge or belief that the employee has filed or intends to file. So under current law, an employer can fire you after you get hurt at work for saying, the employer can say, I'm firing you because you got hurt and you're filing a claim, and also because I don't like your tie. And it would be on the employee to prove that the excuse about not liking the injured worker's tie is not valid. It would be on the employee to prove that the only reason they're being fired is for retaliation. Under my proposed change, it would be on the employee to prove just that retaliation played a part. So this would not apply to any fraudulent claims. It would not prevent the firing of workers entirely who have been hurt at work and who intend to file a workers' comp claim. It would only prohibit those firings if they are motivated by retaliation.
And just real quick before we hear from anybody else, does an employee who has a potential claim or an actual claim who is terminated, does that affect their workers' comp in any way?
It would not affect their active claim. However, they would, I believe, have a cause of action to go after the employer for the retaliation.
So I'm sorry, that's what your bill is trying to do, is create that cause of, or clarify that cause of action, expand it. I'm asking under existing law, and frankly under your change here, if I'm injured on the job and I either intend to file or I have not filed yet, and then I subsequently lose my job, is that a relevant factor at all in the commission considering the compensability of my claim, the fact that I'm no longer employed?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman, but we have some members of the commission here that may be better able to answer that question.
All right, thanks so much. Anybody here speak in favor of the bill? Anybody here speak in opposition to the bill? And we do have the commission here if anybody has any technical questions they'd like to ask. I'm sure they'd be happy to oblige. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chris will go again for PCI, AIG, Chubb, and Nationwide Insurance. I take a little issue with the patron's description of the bill. This is not a small change. This is a pretty large change because it lowers the bar substantially. That to any extent language, to any extent is a grain of sand on the beach, is to some extent. It also injects subjectivity into the matter as to whether or not a cause of action exists, and they can claim that the employer believes that a claim is about to be filed, and if that's the basis for their suit in circuit court. I think this oversteps the boundaries of the employer-employee relationship, and here's a bit of bad news for employers. There's really no coverage for this kind of circuit court action whatsoever. In the employer's liability policy, there's an exclusion that exists in the policy, and I'll just quickly read it to you. This insurance does not cover damages arising out of coercion, criticism, demotion, evaluation, reassignment, discipline, defamation, harassment, humiliation, discrimination against, or termination of any employee or any personnel practices, policies, acts, or omissions. So the employer who may harbor a belief, may not harbor a belief, but the claim can be made in circuit court that's the basis for the termination and the cause of action in circuit court. So we would urge you not to support this bill.
Thank you. All right, anybody else here speaking in opposition to the bill? Why not introduce yourself, offer your testimony?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ryan Dunn, Virginia Chamber of Commerce. We also oppose the bill. It is a significant change, even though it may just be one word that is being removed. It's even broader than the Title VII motivating factors test. The next step, if you wanted to go down on this, would be the but-for test, but this has gone completely in the opposite direction of where we currently stand. So every single employee who has ever had a workers' comp claim and then is fired even a year or more later would be able to allege themselves to a jury in Virginia because we do not have summary judgment. Virginia is also alleged by many employers to be terminated. This is really a golden ticket to allow somebody, even after they are fired or for due cause or decide to quit, really
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jody Roth on behalf of Virginia Retail Federation. I was also asked to speak on behalf of my colleague Nicole Riley with the NFIB, who is in another committee right now. Both of our organizations oppose this legislation, and would just like to echo the comments of Mr. Ryan Dunn and Chris Legault. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Come on.
Mr. Chairman, real briefly, John Hurd on behalf of BSIA and Ms. Holman's. Ditto to everything that's been said before me. I would point out that this is going to make it very difficult for employers to fire anybody if they have a legitimate reason to do it. It's going to make them scared that they're going to be sued.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Taylor Cosby with the American Church Association, and we also oppose this. We think this is taking big steps to undercut what is a very good workers' comp system right now, and it's heading in the wrong direction with this kind of action.
Thanks, sir. Anybody else here speak in opposition to the bill? Anybody here to speak to the bill that hadn't had an opportunity to do so? All right, Mr. Carter, you get the last word. I'll tell you, I don't support your bill, and I want you to know why. I think the current law is unfair to employees. I think it's unfair to an employee to be able to say, you got hurt and you were late on Tuesday, therefore I'm firing you, and it's really retaliatory discharge. This just swings it way too far in the other direction and essentially makes workers into a protected class and essentially gives them the protections, the non-discrimination protections of other protected classes that makes it, I think, impossible to terminate them. So I appreciate what you're trying to do because I actually do think the current law is probably too unfair. This just swings it way too far in my mind. But you get the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that point, under current law, because the current law says the only prohibited action is that you cannot be fired solely because of retaliatory intent, that creates a situation where essentially it is impossible for an employee who has been retaliated against to prove that it is a prohibited retaliation. I mean, even if the employer outright tells them to their face that it's for retaliation, because that solely because language is just incredibly restricted.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, the HB 460 is before the committee. Do we have a motion? Delegate Hugo.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the efforts, like you said, that you brought to this, but I think given the questions that have been raised, I'll make a motion to pass by indefinitely.
All right, the motion is to pass by indefinitely. Is there a second? All right, second. My understanding is that's a debatable motion with 2 minutes per side. Do you wish to take your 2 minutes?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, then we will open up the voting board. The vote is to pass by the bill indefinitely. All those wishing to vote, cast your vote in the electronic voting board. All right, close the roll. The vote is 5-1 to pass by indefinitely. All right, your next bill is House Bill 461, Employer Notification, Employee of Intent, and Workers' Compensation Case. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 461 is inserting a timely notice provision into the Workers' Compensation Code. So under current law, there is no statutory requirement for timely notice. Once an employee has filed their claim, it is up to a rule by the commission that they issue what's called I believe a 20-day notice. And that notice contains very little information. It commands the employer to either say that they intend to approve the claim or deny the claim. However, under my proposed language, this would create a statutory timely notice provision, which would include additional information. So the employer would be required to state whether they want to approve the claim or deny the claim and state the reason, or whether they have not received enough information from the employee and what additional information they would need. So this is aimed at speeding up the process through the Workers' Compensation Commission. A lot of these cases are slowed by a lack of information that is provided from the employer to the employee.
Great. And before we hear from anybody in favor of the bill or opposition to the bill, I do want to give the commission a heads up. I'm going to ask you all, somebody, either the commissioners, Commissioner Shablevis, to give us just sort of a status update on where we are and how fast claims are being processed, when the employer has to stake out a position in this case. I know we heard in our Commerce and Labor briefing earlier this year about how the overall time for litigation of these files has dramatically shortened. So I'm going to ask that question. But in the meantime, is there anybody here speaking in favor of the bill? Anybody here speaking in opposition to the bill? And then I'm not sure if Commissioner Marshall will come up and tell us.
that's taking place. However, this is shifting the burden to the employer. The employer, a lot of times, just goes to their insurer and asks what is covered and is not covered. This is now requiring essentially that all employers know what is in every single insurance policy that they may have. So we think it is covered where it is, and there are recourse for that under current policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chris Lavelle again for PCI, Chubb, AIG, and Nationwide and the B&O insurance programs. We think this is creating a burdensome, unnecessary amount of paperwork. About 90% of the claims that are filed with the Workers' Compensation Commission are routinely handled with the existing paperwork requirements. Only about 10% ever wind up going to a hearing. So we don't think that all those cases, the 90% of the cases that are handled now under existing requirements, need to get one additional requirement thrown at them. It's just unnecessary. I would urge the committee to PBI this.
Thanks, sir. Anybody else here speaking up? Just introduce yourself and offer your testimony.
Real quick, Mr. Chairman, John Hurd again on behalf of DSI and Dennis Holdings. A couple things that have been said. The bill mandates providing a decision even when accepting a claim, formally and in all cases. As Chris said, the vast majority of cases, they're submitted, they're reviewed, they're paid, they're closed. There's no commission involved other than receiving a notice of the claim from the insurer, TPA, or the employer. What happens if the response is not received within the required time frame under this bill? Is the commission ready to send out orders and begin docketing non-disputed short duration claims? It really appears to set up a system in this bill that's going to require a complete waste of time on behalf of everybody. The mechanisms are currently in place. The commission's electronic data interchange filing requirements have sped up things. They've got the 20-day orders. We ask them not to go into flash.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Joe Hudgens with the Independent Insurance Agents of Virginia. We echo what you've heard from the others, but we feel that 10 days is just not enough time to properly investigate and decide whether you're going to pay a claim or not. There's just too many things that can happen that will take longer than 10 days.
Before we hear from you again, Mr. Carter, I want to hear from the commission. Just not everybody does work every day for a living, so did what I said earlier make any sense?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I actually asked some of those questions of our staff. We do have a 20-day process. The only thing I would say to the patrons' comments, the 20-day order does actually have a line on it where the responding party, the employer insurer, can state the reason that they're not going to send agreements. We pretty much rely on those 20-day orders to find out whether an employer or insurer is going to accept the claim and is going to send agreements. And the response to the order triggers off some claims processes for us to follow through to make sure that the agreements on those cases that are accepted do come through. There are a couple of things that happen even before the 20-day process. If a claimant has filed a claim and is represented by counsel, and counsel says, please refer this to the docket, there is no 20-day order, it goes straight to the docket. If a claimant has filed a claim and we do not have supporting medical documents, and we require supporting medical documentation before we will give up our valuable docket time, the filing of the claim before the 20-day order goes out, our staff is on the line to the claim, usually within 1 to 3 business days, saying we need supporting medical documentation. Can you get that? If the person is unrepresented and they've gotten us medical documentation, it will go to the hearing docket. So really, that 20-day order process right now is we're primarily using that to make sure that we get the agreements on the accepted claim. And as far as our claims processing time, even if we send out a 20-day order, the employer or the insurer responds and says, claim is denied, we're not accepting it. Within 1 to 3 business days after that, we're getting it in the hopper to get it on the hearing docket.
And what happens if the employer or the carrier doesn't respond to the 20 days?
We have what is called a pre-contempt order, where we will send a letter out and it says this is a pre-contempt order. We ask for your response. You didn't respond, please get it to us, or we may hold
Is there any kind of procedure in place to deal with that?
You all have passed a statute that says that where claims are denied or unreasonably defended, there are sanctions, including cost and reasonable attorney's fees, as a matter of statute that are in the code right now.
And have you all had to implement those provisions?
Yes.
Frequently? Okay. All right. Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You don't have anything else to offer on the bill, right?
No, sir, no financial impact, and it's popular.
Yeah, great, thank you. All right, any questions for the patron? Delegate King.
There you go. Just a quick question. I do appreciate the delegate bringing this and the other two bills. I think they do certainly raise the concerns that there are some employees who are, for whatever reason, being discharged unjustly and that they're not getting the notice. I'm just curious about your language of the 10 days that you chose. Is this something that you saw in other states or other models where you've seen this happening, or is this something that you just came up with as a 10 days as kind of a window that might make sense?
The 10-day standard would be a policy decision. There are other states that have implemented similar statutes that are much faster. Illinois, in particular, has I believe, a 3 business day standard, which is far faster than what I'm asking for here. I believe that answers your question. Sure, thank you.
All right, any further questions for the patron? All right, patron gets the last word.
Several of the things that we heard, I would like to add additional information to. So the problem that this seeks to address is that there are a number of particularly pro se claimants who are not familiar with the process. Currently, the burden of requesting that information is on the claimant, and pro se claimants in particular would not be likely to know that they are able to request that additional information for why the claim is being denied or what additional information is required by the employer in order to make a determination. So there are a number of claimants who don't actually find out why their claim is being denied until they're actually in front of the commission. And this would fall into, I believe we heard there's 90% which are sort of handled administratively and 10% that get before the commission. This would be aimed at removing problems from that 10%. It would make the process much more common sense for claimants, particularly pro se claimants who, like I said, are not familiar with the process because the vast majority of them have never gone through it before.
All right, thank you, sir. Anybody on the subcommittee have any more questions? All right, the bill is for the subcommittee. Doug, you go.
Mr. Chairman, again, I know the patron has a history, concerns with this issue, and I appreciate the passion he brings to it. I think the members have testified, other members have testified in the body, bring some things we need to take under consideration. With that, I move this bill be PBI.
All right, we have a motion to pass by indefinitely House Bill 461. Is there a second? All right, moved and seconded that we pass by indefinitely House Bill 461. That provides for 2 minutes of debate on each side. Would you like to use your 2 minutes?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So as Delegate Hugo alluded to, this is a bill that comes from my own personal experience with the Workers' Compensation Commission. I was a pro se claimant several years ago, and I received a notice which came from that 20-day notice that the commission issued to my former employer. It had the denial box checked with no additional information provided. And because I was a pro se claimant, I was not familiar enough with the process to know how to request that the commission demand that additional information be provided to me. So the change in the process here is aimed at streamlining the process, particularly for pro se claimants, so that they actually find out on what grounds their claim is being denied before they are standing in front of a judge and have to argue against it.
All right. Anybody want to take the 2 minutes in opposition? All right, hearing nobody, the motion is to pass by indefinitely House Bill 461. We'll open up the roll. Those wishing to vote, cast vote in electronic voting board. All right, and we'll close the roll. The final vote is 5-1 to pass by 461 indefinitely. Delegate Carter, I think you have your final bill. It's House Bill 462. Foreign injuries, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So House Bill 462 updates the current 3-part test for jurisdiction of out-of-state injuries. The 3-part test that currently exists has a lot of language regarding an employee's separating two groups of claimants: those who are remote employees of corporations that operate primarily outside of Virginia, but the remote employee works primarily inside Virginia. And the second group would be employees who are hurt on business trips outside of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So under my proposed language, an employee who primarily works inside the Commonwealth of Virginia but gets sent on a business trip to pick a state with a less claimant-friendly environment than Virginia's would be able to choose to file in Virginia so that we have a minimum standard of protection available for our residents.
Let me make sure I understand this. So it's not that they don't have some state where they can be compensated, it's that you would sort of flip it so they'd be more able to invoke their preferred jurisdiction between the site of the injury and the site of the employment?
That's correct. For anytime you get a jurisdictional question like this, the claimant can choose which state they wish to file in. In the example of my own case, I was a Virginia employee working remotely for a Georgia corporation, and I got hurt in Illinois. I had my choice of the three. And thinking like a human rather than like a court, I chose the Goldilocks state, which out of those three would be Virginia. I thought that would be the most fair both to me and to my former employer. At the end of the day, my former employer went into the courtroom and said that it was a compensable injury, but it was not a compensable injury in the Commonwealth of Virginia because the offer letter which I had signed, which stated at the bottom that it was not a contract for employment, they claimed it was a contract for employment, and that was an argument that the deputy commissioner accepted.
Okay, so I say all the time, don't let it say by anecdote, but I do want to understand this anecdote. So the issue is that you didn't actually have a claim in Virginia, but you erroneously believed you did and filed here, and then that was kicked. You couldn't go to Illinois or Georgia and recover?
No, Mr. Chairman. The issue was that the current three-part test for jurisdiction relies a lot on your contract for employment, and I did not have a contract for employment. However, my former employer had gone before the commission and argued that documents which explicitly stated they were not a contract were in fact a contract.
Right. What I'm saying is, so the result of yours was that you did not have a claim under Virginia law. Did you still have your claims under the other states' laws that would have had jurisdiction?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And it certainly is a statement of fact that very few employees nowadays operate under employment agreements. So, okay. Anybody here to speak in favor of the bill? Anybody here speak in opposition to the bill?
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Of course, we go for Nationwide Insurance, Chubb, BCI, and AIG. I think the chairman has figured this one out adequately. No compensable claim was lost to the patron of the bill. He had a compensable claim, it just wasn't here. It was in Illinois where the injury took place. And there's no way that Virginia can bar Illinois or restrict Illinois' right to assert jurisdiction over the claim that took place there.
Mr. Bill, let me ask you a question. Are you aware of any, and I don't know the answer, I'm not setting you up. Are you aware of any states that's jurisdictional law is such that you could have a scenario where it doesn't apply in either state?
I'm not aware of that. I think that probably across the board, and Commissioner Marshall may know the answer to that question. I think that across the board, it's where the injury is going to take place that governs.
And so my understanding, and that's why I was asking, is that every state would provide a form if you're injured in that state. And then the question is, what other types of relationships would expand that either to where the employee is located or where the employer is located?
I'm not aware of any circumstance that offers that kind of a choice.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Delegate Marshall. Mr.
Chris.
Sir.
Let me ask, if we pass this in his scenario there, could he double dip? Could he go to Virginia and apply, and then also go to Illinois? I mean, does Illinois talk to Virginia to see if their claims have been paid twice?
I think that the employer or the insurer or the employer, when the second action was brought, they would bring information to bear on that to say, he's already been compensated for the same injury in another state. So I don't believe there'll be a double dip opportunity there.
What it does is it increases the potential forms that a claimant might have. It expands the time Virginia might be kicked in addition to the other states. It would increase the choice of form opportunities for the claimant. Yeah. Yeah, come on up.
Joe Hudgens, Independent Insurance Agents of Virginia, and I wanted to point out sometimes there's unintended consequences, and that's kind of what I wanted to point out here. If you get down into the weeds a little bit, and on workers' compensation, when you buy, an employee buys a workers' compensation policy, you declare on the information sheet if there are states that you think you're going to do business in other than Virginia, and there are states that you may do business in, and there are states that you definitely will do business in. And I believe if this law passes in its current form, the understanding will be among employers that without making those declarations, I have coverage in other states. And that might be true where an injured employee would get Virginia benefits, but that employer is still going to be liable in those other states because those states are sovereign, and there's no reciprocity in workers' comp. So that employer could also be liable for the other state benefits in addition to Virginia benefits. And I just think that's a precedent that we don't want to set, and that's a danger that would be out there as an unintended consequence.
Yeah. You know, my issue is, Bill, I'm sorry, go ahead, come on up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ryan Dunn, Virginia Chamber of Commerce. While the intent of the bill, maybe not the reason for this, we view this as forum shopping, looking for the best venue possible to receive the most in the claim. You know, we'd like to see it stay as is. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Taylor Cosby, again with the American Insurance Association, and that's the concern we've got is the forum shopping area and not knowing where these things are going to be brought. We've done some bill.
All right, thanks, sir. Yeah, what I was gonna say, my concern with this bill is that the workers' comp system is very complex and sort of very delicate balance in a lot of ways in the system, and both within the state and externally. And I'm afraid to do anything that's going to imbalance the nature of the claims that are going to be pulled into the Virginia system. And again, I understand what you're trying to do. I'm not going to support the bill because I think the balance we have right now is appropriate, but understand and appreciate you bringing it. All right, any questions for the patron? Delegate Key.
A quick question. I mean, I do understand the concerns of forum shopping. I'm not as concerned only because not only the workers' comp situation, but across so many different areas of litigation, the courts tend to be more friendly for forum shopping on the defendant side anyway, and the corporation side to the extent that they choose the venue, the laws, and they have a lot more advantages than most of the injured plaintiffs. So that part I'm not as concerned as the issue of the fact that we've now pegged this law, I don't know how long it's been since this section of the code was drafted, on this idea of having a contract of employment, and the fact that the contract of employment is defined by the commission, as opposed to somebody that says, to your point, Delegate, your document said this is not a contract, and yet the commission interpreted that to be the contract, and that was a basis upon which this section was triggered. So I'm wondering, and I'm not sure if this is a question to the delegate or to the commissioner, or to, frankly, something for us to be thinking about going forward, is regardless of this legislation, which I think is a good way to balance the needs of employees and employers, I wonder if we need to revisit this idea that we have this section in the code that requires a contract of employment to be the basis of this, and why that still makes sense today in this day and age.
Yeah, you could disassociate from a contract of employment and make some other language about the place at which the employee was hired or something like that, and is exclusively in that jurisdiction, and get away from the language of contracting, which we don't do that much anymore. Okay, does the commission have anything to offer on this bill? It's fine.
Mr. Chairman, just to echo one of the speakers, I'm not aware of it from my contacts in other states. I'm not aware of any states where if an employee is injured in that state, that there is a lack of jurisdiction in that state. So, and as I said to you all a couple of weeks ago, every state's
state issue that you're dealing with. And it does get very complex, and it is a 50-state thing that every insurer and every employee has to somehow know the rules in 50 states. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, you get the last word, Mr. Carter.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So, several things. First of all, we heard a lot about forum. I'm sure that the members of the committee are aware that Virginia is not exactly the most claimant-friendly state in the nation. Out of 50, I believe our workers' comp insurance rates are fourth from lowest. There are not very many instances in which an injured employee would try to game the system by coming to Virginia. However, this comes to a policy question as to whether or not we want to allow folks who live and work primarily in Virginia to have the minimum level of protection afforded to them dictated by other states. So from my perspective, this comes from a position of not being particularly trustful of California and Alabama to come up with a uniform minimum level of protection. As far as double dipping, under current law, which is not being changed by this bill, the amount that is awarded in other states is deducted from any awards that would be given in Virginia. And I believe that is the case in the 49 other states, although I've not studied all 49 to see if there's any exception there. But double dipping is not particularly a concern with this bill.
All right. So you said a couple things I totally agree with. I don't trust California, I don't trust Alabama. And I agree that our system's not super claimant friendly, and I agree we have really low premiums. And I can't say that enough times.
Although I think you and I disagree as to whether or not that's a good thing.
No. I think that I believe that there are some changes that Virginia could make to the benefit of claimants that would be more than reasonable. I just don't think this is one. All right, bills before the subcommittee. Delegate Hugo.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to PBI.
All right, we have a motion to pass by indefinitely, House Bill 462. That's been seconded. It's a debatable motion. Do you want your 2 minutes?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As I said, the primary question with our current three-part test revolves around a contract for employment, which very, very few Virginia employees have in 2018. At the very least, this is something that needs updating because this three-part test is massively out of date. Especially since what constitutes a contract for employment is not clearly defined in the Workers' Compensation Act. So there are a lot of questions that are currently being subjectively decided by the Commission rather than having been decided by the General Assembly. So this would give not only a much needed update to the current three-part standard for out-of-state jurisdiction, this would also remove some of those things that are subjective decisions to be made on a case-by-case basis by the Commission.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, hearing no further debate, the vote is to pass by indefinitely, House Bill 462. We'll open the roll, cast your vote on the electronic voting board. All right, cast your vote. All right, we'll close the roll. The vote is to pass by indefinitely, House Bill 462 on a 5-2 vote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, next up, we're going to hear Delegate Guzman's bill. Delegate Reed, I'll let you know, you weren't here, I said earlier, you have a bill that's like Delegate Hugo's bill. If we act favorably on Delegate Hugo's bill, we'll then lay your bill on the table. If we don't act favorably on his, then we'll hear yours and see if we act favorably on yours, okay?
I think they were done.
Okay.
Word for word.
Do you want to get out of here now and we'll lay yours on the table and you just go make from his? Or do you want to hang out?
I'll hang on.
Okay. All right, and I think we have a substitute to Delegate Guzman's bill. We'll get that distributed to the subcommittee and have a chance to take a look at it before we adopt it. All right, we have a motion second to adopt it. Let's take a look at it before we vote on it, just to make sure everybody understands what they're voting on. It's coming. Audience members would like copies of substitute. Mr. Munyon has them here. everybody in the subcommittee's had a chance to take a look at substitute. We have a motion and a second to adopt substitute House Bill 416. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, the substitute is now before us. All right. So let everybody get out of your way, and then you have the floor. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is addressing workers' compensation audits. Currently, for workers' compensation, there are 3 facts that are taken into consideration when a policy is written. We have the classification code of the industry, the payroll, and whatever, if there is a claim or history of loss during when the policy is written. There is an issue in between the classification of payroll. Many employers consider payroll those employees who are through having FICA taxes, but they don't consider the ones that are 1099. So when we talk about the employees with 1099, many times the auditors present just if the subcontractor is paid by a 1099, they present a certificate of workers' compensation insurance, and they get by with that coverage. However, according to the Virginia Workers' Compensation Commission, even if it's a subcontractor and it has a 1099, they should be considered part of the payroll because there is an employer-employee relationship. Right now, the audits are conducted they are mandated by the insurance companies, and the auditors who are performing these audits, they may be an accountant, it might be a payroll specialist, it might be an insurance agent, it could be any of the 3. However, my bill is aiming to promote better, safer, and more informed audits of worker compensation. My revision aims to ensure that when insurance auditors step foot onto the premises where they will conduct an audit, the auditors or insurance agents has the proper background and knowledge of workers' compensation policies. So when they have to perform these audits, they estimate the premium correctly. The insurance background, rather than being to have solely accounting background or payroll specialist, is not what we're looking for when this policy is trying to protect not only employees, but also employers from being liable. One of the things that we are trying to address with this bill is like these auditors usually send a letter prior to perform this audit. These audits, in the audits, they state what they need during this. And I have actually a copy of a letter where it states is have your documents available and don't offer more information that you're asked for because the auditors only have 30 minutes to work to look at your payroll information because they have many audits to perform. So my bill is asking for these auditors to have a license in insurance, in property and casualty, which includes workers' compensation, so they could perform an accurate audit and then protect employees. Because there is so many working injuries at the moment. There is probably more than 4.1 million people in the United States suffer a workplace injury. And it's sad to know that when this person thinks that they are covered under certain workers' compensation insurance, they realize after that accident that they are actually not covered.
Let me ask you a question, because I understand the problem you just enunciated, which is a lot of uncovered employees who don't realize they're not uncovered, and the audits are the way we uncover that. And I understood your original bill as you filed it, you were essentially having a third party participate in the audit by having a commission, so you both have a third party and you have someone trained because they work for the commission. Now that would probably have a big fiscal impact, which may be why you took that out, I'm not sure. But I don't view just having it being a licensed property casualty agent as making you an expert in workers' comp by any stretch. And so I'm wondering why that's where you came down as the alternative to a trained employee of the commission being a licensed property casualty insurance agent. Because I know a lot of those folks who sell car insurance and sell, homeowners policies and that kind of thing, they don't know the first thing about workers' comp. And so is there another subset of people, or is that the best we can come up with, are just licensed property casualty agents?
Well, the Workers' Compensation Commission don't perform the audits. The audits are performed by insurance agents.
I understand what I was saying, I'm sorry. In your originally drafted bill that was filed, the person accompanying the auditor had to be subject to the supervision of an employee of the commission. And so in that case, you're bringing in a third party expertise in workers' comp. My issue is licensed property casualty agents don't have any particular expertise in workers' comp. They might happen to be in the comp field, and like, no, but there are many of them who don't do anything in workers' comp. So I'm trying to figure out is why we're grabbing this group of people, licensed property casualty agents, to perform the audit.
Well, Mr. Chairman, actually, to get a license in property and casualty, you need to have knowledge and understanding of commercial policy, workers' compensation, and general liability as well. It's part of the requirements to get your license, or you don't get license in the state of Virginia.
I guess what I'm saying is if you go ask the person who sells car insurance to you, who's on Main Street in your neighborhood, who works for Nationwide and sells nothing but car insurance, and they've had their license for 20 years to sell car insurance, and you go ask them a technical question about the workers' comp system and what they need to identify in an audit, they're probably not going to be a very good person to provide that information, is my point.
Well, they actually have to take, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, but actually in order to have your license current, you are supposed to take CE credits to stay on top of the regulations every 2 years.
All right. Anybody else here speak in favor of the bill? Anybody here speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Chris Legault from Nationwide Insurance, Chubb, AIG, and PCI. We are opposed to this bill. Workers' comp insurers routinely perform these audits all the time. They have to. Premium is based on payroll. Employers miscalculate the state, what their payroll is, and misclassify employees into a lower rated classification, job classification, in order to try to save money. So we need access to the books and records and routinely do these things. The employer, under the policy, is obligated to provide access to all records. The policy language is very clear. It says in the workers' comp policy, you will let us examine and audit all your records that relate to this policy. These records include ledgers, journals, registers, vouchers, contracts, tax reports, payroll and disbursement records, etc. We may conduct the audits during regular business hours, during the policy period, and within 3 years after the policy period ends. Information developed by the audit will be used to determine the final premium. Insurance rate service organizations have the same rights we have under this provision. So this is something that is done in commerce every single day, and requiring that this person be a licensed agent. I agree with you completely, Mr. Chairman. They don't always know anything about workers' comp. They may not even know anything about auditing with books and records. So we think that's a burden that ought not be placed on employers or insurers.
As more people come and testify, I'm going to let the commission know. I want to know from you, Commissioner Marshall, or somebody else, if we have any data on the results of audits, if we tabulated misclassification rates or anything else like that. In the meantime, we'll hear from the other folks here testifying in opposition.
Joe Hudgens, Independent Insurance Agents of Virginia, and I'm just here to say that I'm a licensed property casualty agent, and you wouldn't want me to get anywhere near a set of books.
You're exactly who I was thinking of when I was saying that earlier, but
So I
you know, I say it.
I guess I'll just sit down.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Taylor Cousins, the American Insurance Association, again, we're opposed to this bill because what this is actually asking is that somebody send a helper along or an overseer of the company's auditor who's doing this. And the other good audit that you want done are the safety audits.
did any work product come out of that task force that we're going
Now,
to see?
I've not seen any written work product, and I know, some of the stuff that they were looking at was, pretty broad, I guess is what I would say. So, but I've not seen a final report from that. The one last point I would say is just in terms of clarification on the title of the bill, it still does say supervision by, commission employees, so that would be correct.
If an employee or a whistleblower, for lack of a better term, at an employer believed a misclassification was going on, would they call DOLI? Would they call you? What would they do?
So, we set up something as sort of a pilot project about a year or two ago called the VANCA website, Virginia Employer Non-Compliance website. There is a website that an employee could go to and report that. We would probably turn that, it was a misclassification problem, we would probably turn that over either to that task force or to the Attorney General for investigation. I do think they have some jurisdiction over there. We also have internal compliance just as far as, ensuring that employers that are supposed to have insurance do have insurance. So that piece of it we actually handle. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else here to speak to the bill that hasn't had an opportunity to be heard? All right, Delegate Guzman, you get the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is just disappointing to hear that the lobbyists for the insurance agency don't advocate for the regulations and they make fun of an insurance. I've been a former insurance agent and I took my job seriously. And before I take that license test, I made sure I knew what I was signing up for. In their hands are the lives of thousands of people, and they are aware that their employers are cheating the system. Because when these audits are conducted, most of the time, because I met with the commissioner, with Workers' Compensation Commission as well, most of the time there is a decline on the amount of premiums that they have to pay. 1 year they start, the employers that they have 5 employees, that the next year they know how to work the system, and they said, oh no, I just have 3, because 2 were seasonal. And just because we're not asking the following up questions or having enough knowledge when these audits are performed, we could be losing lives. And it's just sad and disappointing that these lobbyists are not taking responsibility. Even though, it's not about the amount of policies that they are selling. I believe that our job should be to protecting the lives of the workers.
But let me ask you a question, because I totally agree with a lot of what your motivation is and the problem you're identifying, which is misclassification, lack of coverage, those types of things. Where I have a breakdown with you is it seems to be like the employer doing the audit more than anybody else has incentive to get it right because they want to rate that employer properly. And so they're the ones with the most incentive to identify misclassification or non-identification of employees or reduction in risk or the types of things you're doing in the audit. So what I'm trying to think of is why would the carrier with the incentive to find the problem be benefited by a separate property and casualty agent going with them to perform the audit?
Well, actually, when you are buying the insurance, the workers' compensation insurance for the first time, and you're filling out the application, there's a list of details that you should be providing to insurance agent. It's very thorough, so it tries to address this. However, when the audit is conducted, this is what they're asking for. When preparing for your workers' compensation audit, you should plan to make it available to the auditor only those items they ask for. There is no reason to give them or volunteer more information that they ask for. Remember, the quicker an auditor can finish his job and move on to another audit, the better it is for you and for them. Here's some of the common reports and documents employers ask. Payroll journal, but it doesn't include, for example, 1099s, it just says payroll. And as I explained to you earlier, and to the committee members, that anyone who is a subcontractor and there is a working relationship, they should be included as part of the audit as well. Your checkbook, your state and employment tax, so it's actually saying indirectly that we should include those employees only, the ones that are deducted unemployment and FICA taxes, and all overtime payroll records.
I think what you ought to do, if it were me, I would identify a way to hold employers to a greater level of accountability who don't accurately classify and don't categorize employees properly, and go at it from that end instead of from this this end, but I do think you're going at a real problem. I don't agree with the way you're going at it, but I do agree it's a real thing. Okay, the bill's before the subcommittee.
Just a quick question to make sure that I understand. So with the substitute, you don't have a fiscal impact problem anymore?
No.
Because you're not using county employees. And was that the reason why you wanted to go with the insurance agents as opposed to going with the workers' comp folks?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So to the, Mr. Chair, follow up.
Yeah,
I agree with what the chairman said, that this is a real problem, and there's got to be some way for us to make this clearer, and you just identified a very, very clear way that there are many ways that the system as it is implemented may be shortcutting, maybe not providing the information that they need to for safety. And so it does seem that this is a problem, and I guess I would hate for the fiscal impact issue to be the only reason why we can't get the most qualified people involved with this. So maybe if there's some other way that we can try to address this problem where we have the workers' comp employees and other experts, and maybe also revisit the standards of audit that we're requiring, that might be a way for us to solve this problem that you brought to us. So in the spirit of helping you and keeping this issue out there, I'm going to move to report this bill, but I think maybe, however way this goes, I'd love to come back and work with you so that we can move forward next year with maybe not this, but also other bills that deal with these issues, because it does seem that workers' comp is a system that does need some more reform. So I want to thank you for doing this, and I'm going to move to report this up.
So I recognize you for the comments, I hadn't recognized for a motion.
Sure.
Delegate Hugo had already indicated he was next in the queue for a motion.
That's fine.
Mr. Chairman. Delegate Hugo has a motion to pass by indefinitely, House Bill 416. Is there a second? All right, moved and seconded. That is a debatable motion where each side gets 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes to close your argument if you would like. You're not required to take it.
No, I'll just revise the permits here and take Delegate King's recommendation.
Great, thank you. And I think Delegate King was more than happy to work with you on things like this. Okay, so the motion before the subcommittee to pass by indefinitely, House Bill 416. We'll open the roll. All those wishing to vote, cast your vote in the electronic voting board. All right, we'll close the roll, and the vote is 5-2 to pass by indefinitely, House Bill 416. Thank you, Delegate Guzman, and we'll definitely work with you next year, see what we come up with. Okay, we have next up Delegate Hugo's bill. This is on the presumption. Then we're going to deal with Delegate Yancey's final bill as well, and Delegate Reed's bill if need be. All right, House Bill 1245, Delegate Hugo. I think there's a line amendment. 1245. Okay. All right. Let's present the bill as it is and see if anything else is needed.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. House Bill 1245. I think one of the things when we think firefighters, running into men and women running into a building, you think of smoke inhalation, being burned. But one of the problems they run into every day is the poisons that literally are in the air and that absorb through the skin as they breathe. So it's not necessarily not only fire, but these men and women, brave men and women, they can go into these buildings and they're burning certain materials not meant to be burnt, these harmful toxins. And I think that's something that what we found is that firefighters, on average, have 14% higher risk of cancer than the average Virginian. And it's hydrogen cyanide, benzene, styrene, formaldehyde, vinyl chloride, things that are absorbed in the skin and inhaled every time they walk into a fire. We have worked over the last number of years on the Virginia Workers' Compensation Act, and it's worked well in many ways. But one of the things that's left out is what we do here in this bill. This bill simply changes the presumption. It adds cancer to the colon, brain, and testicular to the list of cancers that are presumed to be occupational diseases covered by the Virginia Workers' Compensation Act. This is something that, again, I think it's a justice, the right thing to do for our firefighters, for these men and women that are in every district that we have across the Commonwealth. And it's also the #1 issue of Virginia professional firefighters issue. Again, I think that we have a number of firefighters here that the organizations are going to want to testify on it, but I appreciate the committee, the body, listening to our comments.
Absolutely. Let's have those who are here to speak in favor of the bill come on. While they're coming up, I'll note for the subcommittee again, a lot of us have heard this bill before. A lot of us have heard is the adding in of the other cancers. The other thing this addresses is the contact with toxic substance, which is actually sort of a new issue that's brought about by some recent court action that essentially arguably gutted the presumption and they put that toxic issue exposure. So, all right, here to speak in favor of the bill, come on up, introduce yourself and offer your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Virginia Diamond, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Virginia Professional Firefighters. As Delegate Hugo said, this is our #1 priority this year, and extremely important Norfolk, Chesterfield, Richmond, Charlottesville, Henrico, Stafford, and the EMWA firefighters as well. And they're seated here. You want to stand up for a second?
Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you. This issue, there's two parts of the bill. One is the part that adds the cancers. The other part strips some of the language that's in there that Delegate Habib referred to, that we feel at this point has essentially the workers' comp presumption for cancer for firefighters is absolutely not working anymore. It's become an urgent situation, and I have behind me, a firefighter, Steve Weissman, who has been an active firefighter for 38 years. He has been employed by Fairfax County. He has been employed by Stafford County. He's a resident of Fredericksburg. He, like a number of others, has been exposed to carcinogens over those 38 years. And despite our best efforts at prevention, and despite the protective equipment that's being used, there's obviously absorption of carcinogens. So Mr. Weissman contracted prostate cancer, which is one of the enumerated cancers. He presented evidence of exposure to toxins. He provided an expert physician from Johns Hopkins University who stated that he had been exposed to known carcinogens, that these known carcinogens were related to prostate cancer, and that in the doctor's opinion, his occupational exposure as a professional firefighter was the strongest risk factor for developing prostate cancer. Despite the fact that he presented all of that evidence, the commission found in December that he was not entitled to the presumption. He couldn't even use the presumption, and for that reason, he was essentially left with having the burden of proof, which was denied. Now, the purpose of the presumption under workers' comp, I think most of you are aware, all it does is it shifts the burden of proof. It's a rebuttable presumption. And the reason why this presumption was adopted for heart and lung, for cancer, for infectious diseases, etc., for firefighters, is because the commission, like most states and the legislature, has decided that it's more fair to impose that burden of proof on the employer. Now, lung cancer, which is covered under another section of the Workers' Comp Act, doesn't require all of these IARC machinations, and so if a person, firefighter, contracts lung cancer, all they have to establish is they're a firefighter, and they contracted lung cancer and have a disability, then the burden of proof shifts to the employer. That's how the presumption is supposed to work. And in many cases, the employer is able to rebut the presumption by showing other causes. The person wasn't exposed to sufficient carcinogens, there wasn't a sufficient duration, or there were other causes. They smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day, etc., and then the case is defeated. But what we really feel strongly about is that we should take out this language that is preventing the firefighters from having access to the presumption for any cancers at this point. The IARC was never meant to be used in this way. It was established, it has monographs that delineate known and suspected carcinogens, but it's not supposed to be a reference that proves that specific chemicals cause specific cancers in specific individuals. So that's the reason why we want that out.
Let me ask you a question, and I'm very sensitive to asking this question with the commissioner sitting here, and I'm not doing this to second guess the decisions they reached. Cases are very, very fact specific. I don't know the specific facts of the case. I haven't read the case. I'm not trying to question their decision. Was the issue in that case that they required specific proof of a connection between that toxin and that cancer, or why was the presumption not granted?
Mr. Chairman, we had that evidence. The doctor stated that that specific chemical does cause that specific type of cancer.
He had continuous service, he had exposure, and he had cancer, but it still wasn't given.
Presumption wasn't applied, and you know, there have been other cases in the past couple of years where the presumption hasn't applied, and I had, in my mind, thought, well, maybe the facts may be the circumstances, maybe the evidence. In this case, there was a physician who stated that this benzoylpyrene and these diesel fumes cause prostate cancer. So we had, I think that Mr. Weissman provided all of the links, but even so, what we believe is that this should not be this arduous or complicated to access a presumption. The presumption is supposed to be, as it is with the heart, lung cancer, it's supposed to be something that shifts the burden of proof. We feel that's only fair considering what these people expose themselves to. And then we've also asked, we talked about, which cancers should be added to the list. We discussed it, and the group decided that they would ask for only these 3, and then it can be assessed over time as to what are the fiscal impacts, how is that working, et cetera. So we felt that that was a very modest request, given that these cancers and other cancers are linked to firefighters via numerous epidemiological studies.
And it's contrary to the more expanded view that I asked you to consider, which is just any cancer. So.
Yes, we appreciate you raising that. There are 20 states that cover all cancers, including Alabama and Tennessee. But we did not go that way because we felt that we would go with these 3 cancers, and then we will see whether the system's working and what the costs are.
Okay, thank you so much. Anybody else here speaking out, in favor of the bill? Come on up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Steve Weiss. I have to correct Virginia. I now have 40 years as a firefighter.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. At age 59,
Yes.
at age 59, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. No family history, never smoked. Over my years in the fire service, I worked for Fairfax County. I was on the urban search and rescue team, been all over the world helping people. When I got my diagnosis, the first thing I did was talk with my wife. We met with the physician. After wiping the tears from her eyes, I asked the physician how long will I live. 20 months it's been since my last treatment. I'm back to work, and I'm serving the citizens again. I've been injured many times in my career. I've always put in for workers' compensation that have never been denied. This time I was. I met every intent of the current bill. It was still denied. I met with a physician that Virginia Donna mentioned from Johns Hopkins University. She's an occupational oncologist professor. And she deemed that my chemicals that I was exposed to, the toxins that we breathe in every single day, that are on our gear, that we absorb through the skin of our bodies, that lay for days, was the cause of my cancer. And it was still denied. I'm still in the fighting process. I'm not giving up. And I certainly appreciate your time, and I really appreciate if you would support this bill.
Thank you, sir. All right, anybody else here speaking in favor of the bill? Come on up. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Wayne Huggin, Virginia State Police Association. These presumptions would also cover troopers assigned to the North Carrier Safety Units. For those reasons and the reason that have been articulated, we support this measure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, CJ Stolle here on behalf of the Virginia Fire Chiefs Association. We also support this bill.
Thank you so much. All right, anybody else here speaking in favor of the bill? Anybody here speaking in opposition to the bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. You can go
Just a
ahead.
second.
Okay. You want us to see it before you start?
Well, yeah.
Okay. Delegate Reed, if you want to say something to this bill, it would be appropriate when Delegate Ego gets back up to speak again, if you want to speak to this one. between 150 million to 240 million over 10 years, and 90 million to 100 million to the state.
Yes, sir. Over 10 years.
Come on.
No, sir. That's conservative. Let me just tell you one thing. What you're forgetting is that LODA is part of this.
Right.
Okay? So, anyway, again, I'm John Hurd on behalf of the Virginia Self-Insurers Association, and also Metis Holdings, the group that oversees the administration of all the workers' comp and liability claims that are against DACO's risk pool members. We do oppose these identical bills because they're going to result in public and private employers becoming monetarily responsible for numerous types of cancer that their employees develop, whether or not the employment had anything to do with it. The way this bill is worded, that's just the case. That's not what Virginia's workers' comp system is supposed to be about. Our workers' comp system is based on what they call the grand bargain. It was made over 100 years ago, whereby employees gave up their right to sue their employers for work injuries in exchange for defined benefits regardless of fault. The problem with these bills is that by removing the language on lines 42 and 43 and lines 46 through 48, they create what I would call an irrebuttable presumption that cannot be overcome by the employer. And that's whether or not the employee had any contact at work with something that might have caused the cancer. For the employees of the entities listed on lines 39 through 42 who work for those employers for 12 years or more, it turns workers' compensation coverage into wage replacement plus health insurance plus life insurance. And don't forget, as I said before, that most of these employees, the public ones, are going to get line of duty act benefits. I say most because the bill applies to the private employers as well. Another problem with the bills is that the scientific research used to support the addition of the 3 new cancers is that it's based on a study of firefighters, what I just handed out to you. Not the hazmat officers, not the state police, not the DMV employees. All those groups are listed in the bill in the existing language on lines 39 through 42, and they're going to get the benefit of this irrebuttable presumption if the bill is approved. These other groups have completely different exposures that must be studied before science can clearly show that their employment exposes them to the same type of substances to which firefighters are exposed. And as for the science regarding cancer and firefighters, the NIOSH study had some serious limitations. I've highlighted those limitations in orange of what I've handed out to you. To quote what the study says, it says, our ability to detect links between firefighting and cancer is still limited. Those limitations are measurements of actual exposures were not available. Information on exposures to cancer-causing agents outside of firefighting was not available. And information on lifestyle choices that are linked to cancer, such as diet, exercise, smoking, alcohol use, those were not available either. The NIOSH study states, and I'm going to quote here, if you're a firefighter and you have cancer, this study does not mean that your service caused your cancer. This study cannot determine if an individual's specific cancer is service-related. In addition to exposures that you may have encountered as a firefighter, there are other factors that may influence whether or not you developed a particular cancer. And the study was not able to address many of those factors. So simply stated, the science is really not at the point where a definitive statement can be made that if you work as a firefighter for 12 years or more and come down with any of the cancers listed in the bill, that your profession is what caused you to contract this cancer. So we feel like to enact legislation such as this with the large fiscal impact it's likely to have on state and local governments is premature and unwise. And we'd ask you not to support it.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else here to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chris Legault for the Virginia Municipal League Insurance Programs. I'll try not to trespass too much on the committee's time by repeating anything that John said, but I certainly agree with all of his comments. Striking that requirement of that there has to be a nexus between the employment and the injury under workers' comp. This just removes the need for any science-based study to prove a link between the occupation and the condition complained of. Another thing that you ought to think about in this matter, in the heart-lung area, the condition must manifest itself within 5 years from the last injurious exposure. There's certainly no back end on these cancer claims the way there is in the heart-lung claims like that. And you ought to consider putting in a statement that it should be within 5 years of the last injurious exposure. Otherwise, you're asking local governments to cover things like prostate cancer. And I mean no disrespect to the gentleman who spoke here about his prostate cancer whatsoever. But you're asking local governments to cover prostate cancer for 85-year-old men who had 12 years of continuous work history as a firefighter, and DML or BACO would be paying that claim at age 85 because there's no back-end requirement of contact within so many years with that toxic substance. So I urge the committee to reinsert that stricken language. It is critical to the history and the life of the workers' comp system in Virginia to keep that language in there to provide that nexus between employment and injury. One last thing that I want to bring to the attention of the committee. Smoking, according to the American Cancer Society, accounts for 30% of all cancer deaths and 87% of lung cancer death in men and 70% in women. So any cancer presumption language that you have must necessarily exclude any firefighter who uses or who has used tobacco products in the past. The bill should include a restriction on tobacco use for at least 5 years prior to the firefighter being diagnosed with this condition. 11 states now do exactly that, according to NCCI. So I would again urge the committee, by all means, reinsert that stricken language. It can't be more important to all of the workers' comp system.
Can I ask you a couple questions while you're standing there?
Yes.
And again, as I said earlier, I love data and I love the evidence to back up what we're trying to do. And you went through those statistics there really quickly about connection between tobacco use and cancer. Was those statistics only tied to lung cancer or was it broader to cancer?
It was all cancers.
Okay.
Smoking accounts for 30% of cancer deaths.
Of all cancer deaths, and then the 70 to 80% was tied to lung cancer?
87% in men and 70% in women.
And so, and again, I want to make sure everybody understands on this bill who's up here voting, there's really two parts to it. There's the new thing, which is striking the toxic contact. There's the thing we've seen before, which is adding in the cancers. It sounds to me like you perceive the striking of the toxic contact to be the more offensive, sort of significant structural change in this, whereas the other one is adding cancers to where, I know you oppose the whole thing, but that's adding cancer already exists. You believe the striking the toxic contact is sort of a fundamental change in the presumptions.
That is a very fundamental change.
Okay. All right, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Taylor Cosby again with the American Insurance Association, and I adopt all of the comments that the people that proposed this. But the other question that I would ask is that Virginia is not in a current system, and with these presumptions, and the further you expand them out, next year, what are you going to say to the warehouse worker that comes in that said, I've had a heart attack, or I've got this cancer, and why don't I get the presumption? Or the truck driver, or anybody else in a operator who makes his living in some dangerous form of occupation. It seems to me that you've got to look at that long and hard, and the more you expand these things, and the more you undercut the Virginia system, which really does say you've got to show a nexus between your injury and your employment. The mere fact that you're employed doesn't give you the right to offer these coverages.
So I appreciate that comment. The reason I disagree with it is we've had this presumption for these folks for many years, and we don't have the dock workers here asking for the presumption.
But you're expanding the presumptions too, which is what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that in the future, it's going to be tough to tell one of the other people now you're not entitled to.
I'll tell them. All right, anybody else here speaking in opposition to the bill? comments you might have.
Please be honest.
Thank you, Delegate Hugo. Thank you, Chairman. I just would like to kind of cover one last thing that we talked about, and you highlighted this as well. There's really two parts to this. One is adding the 3 additional cancers, and the other is actually changing the burden of the presumption to the employer. And I think one of the things that we have to think about when we look at this is that we ask these individuals to come into our houses, our businesses, our homes, into very carcinogenic environments and actually save our businesses and save our homes and save our families. And we're asking in this particular bill to add 3 additional cancers and to change the burden of proof so that when they do experience some type of cancer, that they are able to actually pursue getting compensation for that and getting treatment and not having to work through a whole lot of administrative paperwork and then be denied as this particular individual. So that's the crux of what we're getting at, and I would encourage the committee to report this forward. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. All right, Doug Hugo gets the last word.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, a couple things there, and I appreciate it. One, just as a courtesy, I think it's always good that people have new documents or concerns that they come by and see the patron. Maybe my office has been busy or we've lost it, I'll blame my staff, but some of these documents I'm not sure I saw today, and I always appreciate people bring them by. It's just good form. On the logo, with that, what the Line of Duty Act only applies, made the reference there, only applies, I believe, to those that retire on disability. Fairfax County, you talked about the smoke, they have no smoking policy. Many of these fire departments have no smoking policy that are applicable. And I would just ask, Mr. Chairman, when they talk about the dock workers, the people running truck drivers, next time your house is on fire, call the truck driver. See how that works for you. See how that works when the truck driver shows up. I just don't think that's quite the fair comparison that I might not have made here today. And I just think it's something we need to think about, because what we had here, Steve Wiseman standing here. And did you hear the quiver in the guy's voice when he talked about the cancer and having to tell his wife about it? You've got to understand, have you ever been to a fire? I bet people have always seen it on TV, I bet. You ever been to a fire and you see the timbers burning? You can see that. You can feel the heat. You can see the flames. But do you see the carcinogens that are there? You don't see them, but they're invisible, but they're dangerous, they're insidious, and they're lethal. And that's what we're trying to address today. I understand people have concerns about truck drivers, but these are men and women who run into burning buildings to save us. And I think it's something we need to take under serious consideration. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, the documents for it, look at all of us have up there on our computer, LIS, the impact statement, fiscal impact statement is indeterminate. And I think that's the last thing I want to take into account. I appreciate you taking the time to listen today. You've been very generous. I would hope that the committee would look favorably upon this bill.
All right, let me speak to the bill really briefly, and then I'll call on you, Delegate King. So I've talked to, I think, almost everybody in this room about this presumption and the history of this statute. I hate the way these statutes are written. I hate the way the presumption exists, the way it's evolved over time. I wish we could start from scratch. If we were starting from scratch, it'd take very legitimate debate, as Mr. Hurd and others pointed out, about how we shifted workers' comp to being something different than it was supposed to be. I get all of those arguments. I also do think it's a legitimate point that we really focus on the firefighters, but this code provision doesn't just apply to firefighters. It does apply to some other folks. I get it. I think that's legitimate, and I think we need to continue to make sure that we enact, if we expand these presumptions, we need to do so in a thoughtful and smart way. That having been said, to me, and I'm not casting aspersions on particular judges or deputy commissioners or appellate courts, but I believe this presumption, as it's currently written, has been read out of the code by the courts interpreting this presumption. And if we want our statutes to mean anything, I think we need to make them effective. If we don't think this presumption should have any effect, we should just take it out of the code. But that's essentially what's happened through the courts, as it has been written out of the code. And so I actually am going to support advancing this bill this year. It disappoints me that it has to go to appropriations, and there's no way around that. We have a letter directing us to do so. So if we get an affirmative motion, it would be a recommendation report and refer, but I will happily vote yes if that motion is made. So the bill's for subcommittee.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion, and let me just make a quick comment on this, which is, I was on the subcommittee last year, and the
Why
year
don't you
before.
make your motion and then we'll have a period of debate
Sure.
to speak to if you want.
I'd like to move that we pass a report and refer House Bill 1245 to the Appropriations Committee.
All right, there's a motion to recommend reporting and referring House Bill 1245. Is there a second? Second? Okay. All right, I'm sorry, I think everybody's seconding and you were canceling each other's voices out. All right, so now we'll hear debate on that motion. Delegate Key.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do appreciate both patrons coming forward with this. I've supported this every year, and I had many conversations with Mr. Legault and Mr. Hurt and others. So I do know that this is, in some ways, a little bit of an expansion of what we have. But at the same time, I absolutely agree with what the chairman just said, which is this language has been written in such a way where it's not working well, but it's also serving in a way where we're picking winners and losers. And to the extent that we've already said the firefighters deserve this, adding a few more cancers, in my mind, is not a stretch from where we were. But more importantly, the fact that this language as it is isn't working as well as it should, and this is really supposed to be just a presumption, nothing else, it's just a litigation process. If we can get back to that and give these folks a chance to go to court and make their case, and the other side to make the best case possible, I think that's where the system should work. So in the spirit of working together, and if there are some minor tweaks that we still need to make, we still have a few more opportunities before this gets to the floor. I'm very happy to support this. I want to thank Delegate Reed and as well as Delegate Hugo, and it's good to see some of us having some bipartisan votes today. Thank you.
Delegate Lindsey.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Hugo, I am in support of this proposed legislation. The question that I have in my mind, given what we have as the speculative nature in terms of determining what the economic impact is I do know that something was mentioned earlier about tying it back 5 years to the point of exposure. I didn't know the patron's position on that suggestion.
Something we can talk about in the interim next few days. Be happy to discuss with.
Yeah, and I think what will happen at some point, a more formal version of what we've been handed today, or the original fiscal impact statement, will get finalized. It'll be before appropriations if the bill goes there. Delegate Hugo then, of course, be in a position to work with those folks and see if it needs to be narrowed or be funded as it is.
Mr. Chairman, I would just say a lot of the concerns that were brought forth today, it's the first time I've heard them, so I look forward to working with them.
Yeah. Okay. Any further comment on the bill? All right. The motion is to recommend reporting and referring appropriations. We'll open the electronic voting board and cast your votes. Hugo votes aye. All right, we'll close the roll. The vote is 7-0 to recommend reporting and referring appropriations. Thank you, Delegate Hugo, and Delegate Reed as well. Thank you to you. With that, the chair would entertain a motion to lay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just wanted to let the committee know that the Bureau of Insurance has provided the information requested for House Bill 111, and I appreciate the willingness to engage with Hampton University. So as such, in light of that, I would like to move forward and just suggest that we would move House Bill 111 to the PPI.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second to pass by indefinitely House Bill 111. Hearing no debate, we'll open up the voting roll and everyone may cast a vote in the electronic voting board. Then so that vote is 7-0 to pass by indefinitely House Bill 111. What I was saying then was we need to call up House Bill 472, which is Delegate Reed's bill that it is a mirror image of Delegate Hugo's bill. We appreciate Delegate Reed's participation here today. The chair will entertain a motion to lay House Bill 472 on the table. All right, move the second. We lay House Bill 472 on the table. Open up the electronic voting board. All of this, wish to vote.
A very quick question on that, and I think Delegate Hugo's still here. My understanding is that the two bills are identical, and I reluctantly support tabling this because obviously we can only have one bill going forward. But I wonder if Delegate Hugo would be willing to entertain Delegate Reed being a chief co-patron on this bill.
I think that's full.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, there's a bunch of co-patrons. Chief goes on there. We'll get them on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, cast vote in electronic voting board. All right, we'll go ahead and close the roll. The vote there is 7-0 to lay 472 on the table. The big disorganized stack of papers in front of me indicates that is it for our docket today. Again, we are gonna have our second and probably last meeting of this subcommittee on the 6th. There's some more bills coming there, so that may be another long day for us. Yeah, there's well over 100 bills assigned, and no, to the full Commerce and Labor. So again, as Chairman Kilgore announced earlier, Subcommittee 3 will meet in this time slot next week, which is the Energy Subcommittee essentially. This subcommittee will meet the week after that, so everything else in the subcommittee we heard then, subcommittee's adjourned.